Welcome to Michigan in Focus. I'm Bruce Walker, Great Lakes Regional Editor for the Center Square. And with me is Tom Gantert, the Center Square's Managing Editor. And Tom, you are in Jackson. I am in Flint. But you are going to regale me with information heretofore unknown to what is happening in my own backyard. Is that correct?
Yeah, just looking at the general financial situation of the city of Flint. It starts, a lot of cities were able to stay out of red ink because of the influx of federal money from COVID pandemic. So if you look at the general fund, which is kind of the operating budget for every city, for the city of Flint, in 2021-22, they reported a $3.8 million deficit. 2022-23, that jumped up to $14.4 million. That's this year they're projecting. For the next 2 years, and these are just projections, and it looks like they're back of the envelope projections because the revenue numbers are the same for both years, 23-24 and 24-25. They're projecting a $3 million deficit and an $8.2 million deficit. So they're going to be in deficit 4 years in a row. Two of them for sure. Two of them they're being projected. On top of that, the city has a problem in that its pension system is one of the most underfunded in the state of Michigan. Right now, currently, it's only at 28.1% funded. So they're trying to play catch up, and that's created some more problems. But currently, what the city says is that the pension fund gives out about $50 million a year. That it pays out to its retirees. At the same time, employee and city contributions are between 30 and 35 million. So that creates what they call a mismatch. And since 2014, they've lost $100 million in pension assets. So in 2015, the city's portion of the pension plan was $12.3 million. In 2022, it was $30 million. So at the same time, they're going to be in the red. They're also going to be paying more and more towards their underfunded pension plan. It's not really a revenue problem with the city, and you wouldn't expect it to be a revenue problem with the pandemic money. But 2017-18, their total revenues were $94.4 million, and in 2021-22, it was $106.3. And a factor in inflation, that's about the same. But you also have to understand that if you're factoring in inflation today, it's not like inflation from years ago. It's a huge bump because inflation's the highest it's been in decades. So the city's got some financial problems.
Close listeners may know that I am recording here in Flint, and they might hear the rolling thunder in the background because there's a massive storm blowing in here on Thursday afternoon. But that is more or less prescient of what is happening with the finances, as I understand your explanation, Tom.
Yeah. And, if you're in financial problems and you're still receiving pandemic money, which they are, they'll be receiving pandemic money. Cities in general will have pandemic money available to them through 2025. And if you're in deficit now, what's going to happen when the pandemic money runs out?
Well, yes.
It'll get worse.
Right. And you're talking about, I believe that Flint is the first city in Michigan to go through receivership and emergency manager. Is that correct?
Wow, that was a long time ago. That was, what was it, 2009, 2010?
That sounds about right, because I remember the former Comerica economist David Littman was heavily involved in that.
It did not work,
It did not work.
Did not help them out much.
So is this sort of kind of the tip of the spear? I mean, is it just as bad elsewhere in the major metropolitan areas of Michigan? And when I say major metropolitan, there's not a lot of individuals who live in Flint anymore compared to what it used to be and compared to, say, Detroit, which has about 750,000 people, and Grand Rapids and Lansing.
Well, historically, the city of Flint has been one of the more troubled cities in America. The school districts had similar problems too. So it's not just city government that's, had issues. I say what makes it unique to me, at least from all the budgets I've looked at, is that a lot of the cities are doing well now due to the pandemic. The influx of federal money. Okay. It is very unusual to see a city like Flint posting deficits while still receiving federal pandemic money, because that's covered up a lot of spending for a lot of cities. So I guess that would be, to me, that's one of the unusual aspects of this, is that Flint's losing money even with pandemic money. Hard to do, Bruce.
But this is Flint, and we have a city council right now where 2/3 of the members are going through recalls. And it's a 3-ring circus at any given point in time, going to a city council meeting Wednesday night. At least half of the members just walked out before they could actually vote on a measure to appropriate $5 million of ARPA funds. And now there's going to be a lawsuit against the mayor, Sheldon Neely, and the city of Flint proper. So it is what my daughters would have said 10, 15 years ago when they were still in high school. A hot mess, Dad. It's a hot mess. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. I'm Bruce Walker, Great Lakes Regional Editor for The Center Square. Please subscribe, and thank you for listening.